So we did a session, a panel talk on misinformation and mistrust and how we can tackle it. Within our community, there is a lot of mistrust, and this is based on the history. So there's been a lot of mistreatment, misdiagnosis, disbelief, and so on. And that then feeds into the misinformation that's out there. And sadly, that is what's costing lives. So if we look at the landscape today, social media is really, really big, and it's a sort of a blessing and a curse because it means that it means that health information is accessible to everyone and anyone who has a phone and internet. But it also means that there's a lot of potential misinformation that's out there that people are then accessing and absorbing and taking in as fact. And this is where people like me and other healthcare professionals, it's so important that we are in these platforms providing evidence-based, scientific, accurate health information that could be life-saving. And though sometimes it's seen as unprofessional, actually, I argue that this is the difference between someone living versus dying. And often we talk about different determinants of health. And I really stress that health literacy is a determinant of health because you don't know what you don't know. For instance, if you don't know, if we talk about cancer and we talk about womb cancer, if you don't know that bleeding after menopause is a red flag symptom for womb cancer, why would you go get checked out? And if you don't know that you don't know that, why would you go? So this is where if we bridge the gap through accurate, evidence-based, scientific, life-saving information through these platforms, we can make such a massive difference in potentially saving lives. I mean, you have things like, oh, take this supplement, it's going to cure your cancer. Definitely don't take chemotherapy because it's actually very, very dangerous and it will kill your healthy cells and then it will be the reason that you die. And I think what's really scary, actually, something recently has happened within my family where someone is diagnosed with cancer and they don't want chemotherapy because they're scared from what they've seen and heard from the outset is that if you have chemotherapy, it might work for a few months, but then it will trigger the cancer cells to spread. And so they don't want to take it. And that's something I need to navigate and educate to, again, tackle that misinformation, disinformation that's going around. There's also the fact that often when things are shared on social media, people always share the worst case scenario. And maybe it's true for them, but that doesn't mean it's true for everyone else. And there was an example that I actually shared on the panel where, for instance, a cervical screening, there's some rumor going around that the swab that they use for cervical screening, apparently that has chemicals which then induces cancer. So then it stops people going for cervical screening. And we know that cervical cancer can potentially be eradicated one day. So there's so many different misinformation that I believe is costing lives. And again, I know I've said this already, but just to reemphasize, it's why we need the evidence-based, scientific, and accurate information out there, and even on these social media platforms, because actually, a lot of people are getting their health information online. And I'll share with you a stat that this is recent. It's only come out like a couple months ago from YouTube, and this is just YouTube alone. The number of health condition views on YouTube in the UK in 2024 was 6.8 billion. 6.8 billion views in 1 year in the UK alone and one platform. That tells you that people are accessing that. And very finally, I want to mention when we are on these platforms, I'm carrying little props. You may notice. So one is a vulva. I try and destigmatize the word vulva, vagina, and clitoris because the shame and stigma associated with that is costing lives. And that's why people aren't coming forward. They're literally dying of embarrassment. And then I have my breast plushie to demonstrate how to do breast examination. Please do your breast checks. The reason that they're brown is because of representation. So part of the problem when it comes to, it's not misinformation, it's the lack thereof. So there are loads of people, loads of Black women, for instance, who are shocked to learn that, for instance, breast cancer is a condition that can happen to Black women. Do you understand? They think that because everything that they've seen online, the leaflets, the videos, the media information, it's all white women usually. So they didn't associate the condition with them. And that's the same across a lot of marginalized communities. So having the right representation and the visual interpretation of that, and also creating information in a language that people understand, but also in a fun and engaging manner that's easily digestible, that they will take it in, that could be the difference between life and death. Yes, I definitely agree that in order to see big change, we need to get the government involved. We need to get policies in place that is strict and everyone has to follow it. Money would help if there was more money that's put into, cancer awareness, cancer care, cancer treatment, and everything. In an ideal world, if they prioritize health as the main thing, because at the end of the day, as cheesy as it sounds, health is wealth. If we channeled a lot of them money towards that, that could make such a massive difference. And actually, it would save costs because if we catch cancer early, the treatment is less invasive and less costly than when we catch it late. I think it's also important that we implement culturally competent training into healthcare professional care, but also just the general public. And we try and ensure that we're not being judgmental, we're being understanding, and we are putting more money into grassroots organization because that's where the trust is. So there are loads of voluntary grassroots organization, and they are often using their own money and their own funds to get the information out there because they feel like it's their way of giving back and it's something that they need to give to their community. So if there are policies in place, I know a lot of it's to do with money, but I feel like money really does talk. If we champion these grassroots organizations and give them the funds and the facilities and reach out to them, because as I say, they have the trust from their community, that trust that was broken from the other sources, that could make a massive difference. And I know that there are things like the Health Collective with the Well-Being of Women, where they've basically gotten loads of different organizations, grassroots organizations, and they've all put them together and mapped them out so people know where to go and who to access. Because another issue is sometimes we're duplicating things, and we don't have to do that. If it's already there, we can learn from it and try and ensure that it's accessible to everyone and anyone, and get rid of that phrase, hard to reach, because we don't put the onus on them, the patients and people. We are the ones that should be easy to be approached and easy to be accessed, not the other way around. If this is directly to healthcare professionals, I'm saying it as a healthcare professional myself. We need to listen to our patients. We really need to believe them when they tell us that something is wrong. And I think having worked with loads of patient advocates and loads of different community members, the thing I keep hearing again and again is my doctor didn't listen to me. They didn't believe me. I was dismissed. We need to change that culture. And that change comes from us. And whether it's more, again, culturally competence training or having more better communication training and just generally trying to look at the patient. And sorry if I'm going back to policy, if we can put more funding so there's more time for us to spend with our patients, that way we can help them even more. I'm a GP and I'm always running late, but I do that because I can't help myself. It's the only way I can help my patients. So listening to our patients and prioritizing their care in where we can. But if the government can also help us to do that by giving us the most expensive asset out there, time, it would make a massive difference.